The ride continued, the city's lights streaming past in a blur of gold and silver reflections. Emma sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, though her mind was far from still. Every few seconds, she found herself glancing at Ryan, not with curiosity or casual interest, but with an awareness that was almost magnetic. Her heart pounded in a rhythm she hadn't heard in years, a pulse quickened by both fear and fascination. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was married, committed, devoted. She loved Daniel, yet sitting here with Ryan, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Being truly seen. Ryan, for his part, seemed oblivious to the storm he had stirred inside her. He drove with the ease of someone who had done this 100 times before, hands resting lightly on the wheel, shoulders relaxed. But every so often, Emma caught the way he glanced at her. Thoughtful, intense, curious. It was never flirtatious, never casual, but it made her stomach tighten in a way she couldn't quite name. Her thoughts drifted. She remembered quiet mornings with Daniel when they used to share coffee at the kitchen table, laughing over small stories or teasing each other about trivial things. Those moments had become fewer and farther between. Life had grown busy, the responsibilities heavy, and the tenderness had been buried under bills, schedules, and the constant push and pull of adult life. But Ryan, he made her feel that tenderness again, not through words alone, but through his presence. Every glance, every small observation he made, seemed to reach into a part of her heart. She had tried to ignore. Emma clenched her fingers into her lap, fighting the fluttering sensation. It's just admiration. That's all it is, she told herself. He's a colleague. He's being polite. Nothing more. But the truth was, she didn't entirely believe herself. Her chest tightened, a mix of guilt and longing pressing against her ribs. She realized she had been starving for attention, for recognition, for someone to notice the small, unnoticed parts of her. Ryan broke the silence gently. Emma, can I ask you something personal? She turned slightly, meeting his gaze through the dim reflection of the dashboard. Yes, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you feel happy? I mean, truly happy? His tone was soft, careful, almost as if he feared the answer. Emma swallowed, a lump forming in her throat. Truly happy? The question resonated deep inside her. On the surface, she had a life filled with comfort, security, and love. Daniel was a good man, a devoted husband, a steady presence. But true happiness, she wasn't sure she remembered what that felt like. I think I am, she began slowly. In many ways. I have a life I've built, a husband I love. But sometimes, her voice faltered, sometimes I feel like I'm fading into the background. Like the parts of me that are me go unnoticed. Ryan nodded as if he understood exactly what she meant. I know that feeling, he admitted. It's like you're living life on the surface, doing everything right, keeping everyone else happy. But the person inside is waiting to be seen. Emma felt the words sink deep into her chest. They weren't comforting in a simple way. They were dangerous, almost intoxicating. He saw her, truly saw her, and it was thrilling and frightening all at once. The cityscape outside, the window blurred further, the sounds of traffic and distant sirens fading into a kind of suspended world that existed only within the car. For a moment, she imagined time stopping, the two of them held in this quiet bubble, where no one else's expectations, obligations, or promises existed. And then guilt surged. Daniel, her vows, the life she had promised to nurture. She shifted, in her seat, closing her hands tightly in her lap, This is wrong. This cannot happen. Yet every instinct, every heartbeat, seemed to argue otherwise. Ryan's presence was a mirror, reflecting all the emotions she had hidden from herself. Longing, desire, curiosity, a hunger for attention and understanding. Ryan glanced at her again, and this time he spoke more softly. Emma, I'm not trying to come between you and Daniel. I would never do that. But I also know what it's like to feel invisible in your own life. And I just wanted you to know that someone notices, that someone truly sees you. The honesty in his voice was like a key turning in her chest. She had tried to dismiss it, rationalize it, ignore it, but she couldn't. His words weren't a temptation in the typical sense. They were a revelation. They reminded her of the parts of herself she had buried, the person she had been before life's obligations demanded so much. Emma's mind raced. This is fleeting. It's just a ride. It doesn't mean anything. I need to stop thinking like this. But the quiet, soft connection between them defied reason. She realized that what she felt was not physical, not reckless, not even inappropriate. It was emotional. Deeply emotional. And that made it all the more powerful, more dangerous in its subtlety. They reached another stoplight, and the red glow spilled across Ryan's face again. Emma's pulse quickened. She tried to keep her eyes forward, but the pull of his gaze was irresistible. You know, Ryan said softly, almost to himself, sometimes the people we care about the most don't see us. Not really. Emma's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to explain, to reassure herself and him that everything was fine. But words seemed to falter on her tongue. She nodded faintly, swallowing hard. The car remained still. At the light, and for a few heartbeats, they existed in a shared quiet that was impossible to describe. It was filled with understanding, recognition, and the faint, dangerous brush of attraction that had nothing to do with physical desire. And yet, it made her stomach twist with anticipation. Emma's thoughts turned inward. Why am I drawn to him like this? Why does it feel so alive to be seen, to be understood, to be acknowledged in this way? She thought about her life with Daniel again. He was steady, reliable, loving. But he hadn't looked at her like this in years, not with curiosity, not with wonder, not with the quiet intensity that Ryan now held. And that realization frightened her more than anything else. She didn't know how to reconcile what she was feeling now with what she had promised her husband. Ryan seemed to sense her inner turmoil. His voice softened further. I don't want to make you uncomfortable, Emma. But I need you to know, it's rare to meet someone who carries themselves with your warmth, your kindness. And I felt I should tell you. Her heart raced, a mix of guilt and longing. She wanted to pull back, to remind herself of her boundaries. But at the same time, she didn't. She let herself exist in the moment, breathing in the quiet intensity, feeling the fluttering stir of emotions that had lain dormant for too long. The light turned green, and the car moved forward. Yet nothing inside Emma felt the same as it had before. The connection, however quiet and subtle, had shifted something deep inside her. It was as if she had glimpsed a side of herself she had almost forgotten. A part of her that craved acknowledgement, attention and emotional intimacy. And with each passing street, with each soft word from Ryan, that part of her grew louder. It whispered questions she wasn't ready to answer. What if this isn't wrong? What if I've just been starving for someone to see me? The city stretched out before them, alive with lights and movement. Yet Emma felt suspended in her own private universe inside the car. Every glance, every word, every heartbeat between them was a delicate thread. weaving a tension that neither could fully name, and yet both felt by the time they reached the next intersection. Emma knew one thing with terrifying clarity. This ride, this conversation, this quiet, intense moment. It had changed her. She didn't yet know how, or where it would lead, or what decisions it might force upon her. But she knew the spark was there, alive, fragile, and impossible to ignore. And for the first time in a long time, Emma felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Alive. The car slowed as the traffic light ahead turned red. Emma's fingers instinctively curled in her lap, the subtle hum of the engine filling the brief silence. Outside, the city seemed to pause with them. Streetlights glinting on the wet asphalt. Distant sounds of honking horns blending with the low rumble of tires rolling slowly on the road. It was a quiet, almost suspended moment in time, yet inside the car, Emma felt a storm of feelings stirring. She had thought the ride would be mundane, a polite exchange, a short conversation about work or the weather. But now, she realized, she had been wrong. Ryan wasn't ordinary. There was a depth to him, a way he spoke and listened that made her feel seen, truly seen. And it was unnerving. Ryan's hand rested lightly on the steering wheel, relaxed, but his posture was attentive. His eyes met hers in the rearview mirror, lingering longer than necessary. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone else. But, to Emma, it was a spark she could not ignore. "You know," Ryan said softly, breaking the silence. "Daniel talks about you all the time." Emma turned slightly, startled. "He does?" Her voice was cautious, unsure, as though acknowledging this fact could suddenly make the world tilt off balance. Ryan nodded. "Always. How you manage everything at home. How supportive you are. How much he appreciates you." Emma felt a twist in her chest. She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That's sweet of him." Ryan's gaze didn't waver. "It's not just sweet. It's the truth. You really are remarkable, Emma. More than anyone tells you." The words lingered, soft but insistent. Emma wanted to brush them off politely, to not let them touch the parts of her she had kept buried for so long. But they found a place inside her chest where longing and loneliness had quietly settled over the years. She realized she hadn't felt a tension like this in what felt like a lifetime. Not in her marriage, not in her daily routines, not in the hurried exchanges of emails or short phone calls. She glanced at Ryan's profile in the dim glow of the dashboard lights. His expression was calm, sincere, yet something in the intensity of his eyes made her heart beat faster. The stoplight's red glow painted shadows across his face, highlighting the gentle curve of his jaw and the small, easy smile he reserved only for her. Emma's thoughts drifted back to Daniel. She loved her husband. She truly did. But lately, love had become measured, polite, predictable. Life with Daniel had slipped into routines of dinners and bills, small talk, and the occasional embrace that lacked the spark it once held. Ryan's presence, his quiet attentiveness, was like a mirror reflecting the part of Emma she had almost forgotten. The part that longed to be seen, to be admired, to be desired not only for her presence in someone's life, but for who she truly was. Ryan's voice brought her back. "Emma, can I be honest?" She turned slightly to face him, the soft red light illuminating both of them. "Yes," she whispered, almost breathless. "I'm not trying to be inappropriate," he said carefully. When I meet someone, like you, someone who carries herself with such grace, who has so much warmth and depth, I feel compelled to tell them, to let them know someone notices." Emma's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to reassure him that his words weren't crossing a line. but at the same time, she felt an undeniable pull, an intimacy that had nothing to do with physicality. It was emotional, it was magnetic, and it was terrifying. The light shifted, green replacing red, but Ryan didn't immediately press the gas pedal. For a heartbeat, they remained suspended in that space, two souls quietly acknowledging the tension that had flared between them. Emma's eyes met his in the rearview mirror. There was no leering, no casual flirtation. It was something far more powerful. A recognition, a reflection of unspoken truths. Emma thought of her life, her marriage, her vows. She had promised to stay loyal, to love Daniel, to weather the ups and downs of life together. Yet, in this small car, with the city moving past them in a blur of lights, she felt the stirrings of a question she hadn't allowed herself to ask in years. Could she still feel this alive? This wanted, this understood? Ryan spoke again, quieter this time, almost a whisper. Do you ever feel like no one notices the small things about you? Like the little ways you make the world better, that nobody sees it? Emma froze, struck by the honesty of his question. She wanted to answer, to say yes, to confess the emptiness that had settled quietly over her heart. But words felt inadequate, fragile, impossible to form under the weight of what she was feeling. Instead, she only breathed, her eyes tracing the passing lights outside the window, the reflections of street lamps on the wet pavement. All the time, she admitted softly. Ryan's fingers tightened ever so slightly on the steering wheel. He didn't reach for her hand. He didn't lean closer, but his eyes held hers, steady and unwavering, as though he could see into the depths of her longing and sadness, and, just maybe, into her secret desire for someone to understand her fully. Emma's mind wandered, a storm of thoughts and feelings, clashing together. She thought of Daniel, his kind gestures, the love she knew he still held, the life they had built together. And yet, here in this moment, she felt emotions she hadn't felt in years. A yearning, a flutter, a quiet electricity that made her stomach tighten. She considered speaking, saying something to ground herself, to remind both of them of the boundaries that existed. But every time she opened her mouth, the words faltered. Ryan's presence was disarming, his calm attentiveness a balm and a temptation all at once. The car moved forward as the light changed, but the quiet intensity remained, lingering between them like an unspoken secret. Emma felt herself drawn into it, helpless yet unwilling to retreat. And in that fragile, fleeting moment, she realized that nothing physical had occurred, yet something far more powerful had awakened inside her. It was a recognition, a stirring, an acknowledgement of desires she had tried to ignore for too long. The city lights blurred past as they drove on, each passing street lamp reflecting in Emma's eyes like little sparks of warning and wonder. Her heart raced not from fear, but from the knowledge that she had glimpsed a side of herself she thought she had buried. Ryan spoke once more, gently, carefully. I hope I haven't made things uncomfortable. I wanted you to know that someone notices, that someone sees you. Emma swallowed, words failing her. She could only nod, the tension in her chest both exhilarating and terrifying. For a moment, silence returned, filled only by the hum of the tires on asphalt and the distant sounds of the city. Emma knew that this ride, this single drive home, had changed something inside her. She didn't yet know how, or what it meant, or where it would lead. But she knew that the spark she felt at that stoplight, fleeting, fragile, undeniable, would not be easily forgotten. And in that quiet, suspended space between red and green, between caution and desire, Emma understood the truth of one undeniable fact. Sometimes, It wasn't the grand gestures or the shouted confessions that awakened the heart. Sometimes it was a simple, quiet moment, a glance, a word, a shared understanding that could stir emotions powerful enough to leave a lifetime of questions in its wake. Emma never imagined that a simple ride home could feel so complicated. The evening had started out ordinary enough, the kind of night she had grown used to in her quiet, settled life with her husband, Daniel. The city air was cool when she stepped outside the office building, wrapping her arms around herself as the last glow of daylight slipped behind the skyline. Emma glanced at her phone. A short message blinked back at her from Daniel. Running late again. Don't wait up. Love you. It wasn't unusual. Daniel had been working late for months, swallowed by deadlines and office politics. She told herself not to mind, that marriage was about patience, understanding, sacrifice. And she tried. She really did. But standing alone in the glass lobby of that towering office building, Emma couldn't help but feel small. And forgotten she considered calling a cab. Her hand hovered over the rideshare app. But then she heard a voice behind her. Emma. She turned, surprised, and saw Ryan Matthews, her husband's colleague. She knew the name well. Daniel had mentioned him countless times over dinner conversations, usually with admiration. That guy's sharp, Daniel would say, always calm under pressure. Everyone likes him. In person, Ryan was exactly that. Calm, easy, approachable. He wasn't flashy or loud like some of the men at Daniel's firm. Instead, he carried himself with quiet confidence, the kind that didn't need to announce itself. He gave her a friendly smile. Waiting for Daniel? Emma nodded, slipping her phone back into her purse. Yeah, but looks like he'll be late. Again. She tried to keep her tone light, but her own sigh betrayed her. Ryan tilted his head as though he understood, more than she wanted him to. I'm heading out now. Where do you live? Maybe I could give you a lift. Emma hesitated. She wasn't the type to accept rides from men she barely knew, even if he was Daniel's colleague. There was a flicker of something she couldn't name, not distrust, but a strange awareness. Still, it was late. The thought of waiting for a cab outside, alone, made her uneasy. And Ryan's offer sounded sincere. It's really no trouble, he added gently, noticing her pause. It's on my way. I wouldn't offer otherwise. Emma studied him for a moment. His eyes were steady, open, without a trace of pressure. Finally, she nodded. All right, thank you. Ryan opened the passenger door for her with a small, polite gesture, something Daniel hadn't done in years. It wasn't romantic. It was simply courteous, that the small kindness touched her. She slipped into the seat, breathing in the subtle scent of leather and something warmer, cedarwood, maybe mixed with faint cologne. The car hummed to life, and soon they were pulling away from the glowing glass towers of downtown. At first, their conversation was casual. Ryan asked about her day, her work, her hobbies. He didn't fire off questions just to fill the silence. He seemed genuinely curious. Emma found herself relaxing, answering in more detail than she usually would. Laughed when he told her about a small mishap at the office, how he'd spilled coffee on important papers right before a client meeting. Daniel didn't tell me that story, she said, shaking her head with a smile. Oh, he probably didn't want to embarrass me, Ryan replied with a grin. But hey, it all worked out. Clients like honesty more than perfection sometimes. Emma was surprised at how easy it felt, talking to him. With Daniel lately, conversations had become functional, about bills, about errands, about work. Rarely about feelings, rarely about laughter. As the city lights flashed by, Emma realized she hadn't laughed so freely in a long time. The traffic lights ahead turned red, and Ryan eased the car to a gentle stop. The glow spilled across his face, softening his features. Emma glanced sideways, catching the quiet focus in his expression. That was when she noticed something unsettling. Ryan wasn't just being polite. He was paying attention. Real attention. The kind that studied her words, her tone, even her silences. She shifted slightly in her seat, her heart tapping faster against her ribs. It had been so long since anyone had looked at her like that. Ryan broke the silence first. "You know," he said in a thoughtful voice, "Daniel talks about you all the time at work." Emma raised her brows, caught off guard. "He does?" Ryan nodded, always mentioning how lucky he is, how you keep everything together at home, how supportive you are. He says he couldn't do half of what he does without you. Emma blinked, her throat tightening. She wasn't sure why the words made her chest ache. Maybe because she couldn't remember the last time Daniel had said those things to her, not just about her. She turned toward the windshield, staring at the blur of headlights waiting at the intersection. "That's nice of him," she murmured. Ryan didn't look away. His gaze lingered, gentle but steady. "It's more than nice. It's true." The stoplight glowed red, holding them in stillness. Emma's pulse beat in her ears. Something unspoken passed between them in that moment. Something fragile and dangerous. And when the light finally turned green, Emma's breath caught. Not because the car moved forward, but because she realized something she hadn't wanted to admit.